Welcome. My name is Domenic Segalla, and I lead the healthcare advisory practice here at Withum. And for the next 5 minutes or so, what I'd like to do is give you an overview and summary of all the provider relief funds disbursements that have taken place up to date. Talk about the phase 3, which we have some update on that as of this morning. And lastly, discuss the current stimulus package that Congress has been discussing. And if potentially it does get approved, and it sounds like there has been some movement over the last few days, what amount and what in there pertains to healthcare. So without further ado, let's get started. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, called the CARES Act, and the Paycheck Protection Program and Healthcare Enhancement Act, appropriated funds to reimburse eligible healthcare providers for healthcare-related expenses or lost revenues attributable to the coronavirus. These funds were distributed by Health Resource and Services Administration, HRSA, through the $175 billion CARES Act Provider Relief Fund program. And just to note, to date, about $140 billion of that 175 has been dispersed. The provider relief funds were distributed to providers via 2 rounds of general allocation funding and several targeted allocations. Each allocation has a set of terms and conditions that providers must agree to when attesting to receipt of the funds. So let's start with the general allocation funding. HHS allocated $50 billion in general funding proportional to providers' share of 2018 net patient revenue. On April 10th, CMS distributed the first round of general allocation funding, $30 billion, to hospitals via direct grants based on the proportion of Medicare fee-for-service revenue received by the hospital in 2019. A second round of $20 billion in general allocation funding was announced on April 22nd. HHS distributed the additional $20 billion automatically based on a provider's share of total 2018 net patient revenue as part of its $50 billion overall general allocation. So now what I'd like to do is just talk about all of the targeted allocations that have taken place since then. The COVID-19 high impact areas. On May 1st, HHS announced an initial allocation of $12 billion to 395 hospitals that provided inpatient care for 100 or more COVID-19 patients through April 10th. $2 billion of this amount was distributed to these hospitals based on their Medicare and Medicaid disproportionate share and uncompensated care payments. Also, as part of this, on July 17th, HHS announced an additional $10 billion distribution to hospitals in high-impact COVID-19 areas based on a formula for hospitals with over 161 COVID-19 admissions between January 1st of 2020 and June 10th of 2020, or 1 admission per day, or that experienced a disproportionate intensity of COVID-19 admissions. Eligible hospitals were paid $50,000 per eligible admission. The first round of funding was based on a formula that distributed funds to hospitals with 100 or more COVID-19 admissions between January 1st and April 10th and paid $77,000 per eligible admission. The next targeted allocation was the rural allocation. So HHS distributed $10 billion in allocation to rural hospitals, critical access hospitals, and community health centers located in rural areas. Allocations were a minimum of $1 million to each hospital and $100,000 to each clinic. HHS also dispersed an additional allocation of $1 billion to urban hospitals with certain Medicare designation, as well as others that provide care in smaller, non-rural communities. Safety net allocations. A total of $13 billion was distributed in the HHS safety net allocation. The first $10 billion was announced on June 9th, and eligible hospitals received between the minimum distribution of $5 million and a maximum distribution of $50 million. HHS defined eligible safety net hospitals as those with Medicare disproportionate payment percentage of 20.2% or greater and average uncompensated care per bed of 25,000 or more. In addition, on July 10th, HHS announced $3 billion in additional safety net hospital funding and expanded the criteria for qualification to include certain acute care hospitals that meet a revised profitability threshold of less than 3% averaged consecutively over 2 or more of the last 5 cost reporting periods, as reported on the Medicare cost report. So clearly they were looking for those that were also in a bad state from a financial standpoint. The next targeted allocation was the Children's Hospital allocation. $1.4 billion was distributed to approximately 80 freestanding children's hospitals. The following one is a skilled nursing facility allocation. So HHS distributed $4.9 billion to skilled nursing facilities, or SNFs, including distinct part nursing facilities. HHS also distributed funding to all certified SNFs, which is the acronym for certified for skilled nursing facility, with 6 or more certified beds on both a fixed basis and a variable basis. Each SNF received a fixed distribution of $50,000 plus a distribution of $2,500 per bed. In addition, for the SNFs, on August 27th, HHS announced an additional distribution of $2.5 billion to nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities based on a per facility payment of $10,000 plus a per bed payment of $1,450 or $1,450. To be eligible, a facility was required to have at least 6 certified beds. As of this presentation, HHS just recently allocated an additional $2 billion to nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities based on quality performance measures, and my understanding is that was received last week. The next one I want to talk about is very important, and many people skipped over this, but it's the treatment for the uninsured. So every healthcare provider who provided treatment for uninsured, and the key here is uninsured, COVID-19 patients on or after February 4th, 2020, can request claims reimbursement through the program and will be reimbursed at Medicare rates, subject to available funding. And as of this recording, there is still available funding. So the key here is, if you provided service for COVID-19 to uninsured patients, there is a portal through HHS that they will reimburse you at a Medicare rate. Providers must enroll in the COVID-19 uninsured program, which will be overseen by HHS. Further information, including frequently asked questions and a COVID-19 uninsured program portal guide, can be found on the HHS website. Continuing on for other specific allocations, Indian Health Services. $400 million was distributed for Indian Health Service facilities, distributed on the basis of operating expenses. The last one under targeted allocations was for Medicaid and CHIP allocation. So HHS distributed approximately $15 billion to eligible providers that participate in state Medicaid and CHIP and had not received a payment from the Provider Relief Fund general allocation. So what they tried to do here is take and allocate to those who had not received any funding, specifically the Medicaid providers. So that is what had occurred up to date. The last piece I'd like to talk about is the phase 3, which had $20 billion allocated. So on October 1st, 2020, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services announced $20 billion in new phase 3 general distribution. Providers that previously received funding, previously ineligible providers that began practicing in 2020, and an expanded group of behavioral health providers were eligible to apply for additional relief funding. The date for final reporting for the data that was requested was November 6th for the phase 3 funding. The intent of this phase 3 funding was to make sure all providers received at least 2% of their net patient service revenue of 2019. So they tried to take these funds and say, okay, we're going to make a mass distribution, get everyone up to the 2% level. Whatever dollars were left over, so we'll use an example, $15 billion was allocated to get all providers up to 2%. The $5 billion that was left out of the $20 billion would then be used to reallocate under a methodology to be determined. What we do know is, based on the data that was requested, we would believe it was going to be based on lost revenue and the decrease in profitability. As of this recording, which is December 16th, many of our clients reached out, and as of this morning, the dollars received came into their bank account. So the monies were received as of today, Wednesday, December 16th. We're still trying to understand the methodology in the period for these funds to be used. We believe it's going to be 2021, but more to come on that. And lastly, what I'd just like to talk about is everyone has heard the discussions from a bipartisan group during this lame duck period of, will we get another stimulus package? The number out there was $916 billion. As of today, they said it's $900 billion, and they've made a lot of progress because they've taken out the two issues that stand on liability protection and on the state funding. So it seems like something may happen. The important part here is currently in the writing of this stimulus bill, there's $100 billion put aside for healthcare. $30 billion of it is for healthcare testing, COVID testing, and contact tracing of COVID-19. Again, very general terms. There's another $30 billion of what they call additional provider relief funds, but the language ties it to and virtual care expansion. Again, very broad strokes there. And the final piece, which I find the most interesting, of $40 billion. So anyone who received advanced Medicare loan payments, in total, there was $100 billion that were issued. And they have since pushed off the repayment period. The $40 billion here would take 40% of that outstanding loan balance and forgive it or convert it to a grant. So let's say you're an institution that received 10 billion, let's say 10 million as a loan. If this goes through the way it's written today, you will get 40% forgiveness. So instead of paying back the 10 million, you will pay back the 6 million. So much more to come on that. As details come out, we'll be sure to get out in front of it, either through article writing or another recorded webinar. So thank you for your time today, and look forward to any follow-up questions. Have a great day.